Welcome to this. It's the NFL Draft Show on Facebook Live. I'm Blair Kirchhoff. Tonight we are providing a second screen experience for your NFL Draft consumption and enjoyment. We might have done something like this under normal circumstances, but as we know, circumstances are anything but normal these days. And that includes the sports world, which came to a grinding halt in March because of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. Everything stopped. Postseason college basketball, the NBA, the NHL, spring training in Arizona and Florida, the Masters. These are just some of the events that were canceled or postponed to help stop the spread of the virus. But the NFL decided to carry on with its draft, and unless I'm missing something, this is the first major event, live event on the sports calendar since we've been shut down. It's not a competition, but hey, it's the NFL Draft. It's competitive. And the draft has been impacted. The three-day event has become an extravaganza, drawing hundreds of thousands of fans. We've seen this in recent years in Chicago and Philadelphia and Dallas. I'll never forget the opening shot of last year's draft when that overhead camera zoomed in over the stream of fans in Nashville. There must have been hundreds of thousands of them that first night. The overall attendance for the three-day event in Nashville was numbered at 600,000. Hey, a far cry from when the NFL Draft was held at Radio City Music Hall in New York as something of a business meeting. The NFL learned that there was a big market for this, and there could be bidding wars. This year, the draft was going to go to the next level, the glam and glitz of Las Vegas. And it was going to be the full Vegas experience with red carpets set up over the water and from the Bellagio mountains. I just checked the weather. It's 89 degrees and sunny in Las Vegas. If we'd been there tonight, perfect night for the NFL Draft. But instead of that, the Draft Nerve Center is going to be in the basement of NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell's home in Westchester County, New York. All 32 teams have been spending the day, which usually on draft day, spend the time, the weekend in the war rooms in their facilities in years past. Tonight, through this weekend, they're going to have personnel stationed in their dining rooms and studies of their homes. I wouldn't be surprised if we heard a dog barking in the background sometime over the next 3 days. Hey, look, it's an unfortunate matter of timing for the Joe Burrows, the Chase Youngs, the Isaiah Simmons, who in any other year would have heard their name called and they'd be sitting near the stage, they'd hear their name, they'd hug their parents and all the loved ones sitting at the table with them. They would get up, go to the stage, get a baseball cap with the team's logo that selected them, and then a hug from Roger Goodell and a photograph. But you know what? It's a difficult time for a lot of folks who had celebration plans scheduled this time of year, but unable to participate in them. Students in the class of 2020 whose final year was cut short. I think about the winter sports athletes who didn't get to finish, championships, basketball tournaments in both college and high school, and all the spring sport athletes who won't get to compete this season. Well, tonight we have this, a live sporting event that's being broadcast on ESPN and on the NFL Network, and this program via live stream on Facebook Live. We will bring you updates, predictions, analysis, and news from all the NFL teams with an emphasis on the teams in markets served by McClatchy media companies, among them Miami, Charlotte, Fort Worth, Sacramento, Lexington, Kentucky, Tacoma, Washington, Kansas City, and Sacramento. And that includes some of the most interesting teams tonight: the Dolphins, the Panthers, the Cowboys, the 49ers, the Bengals, the Seahawks, and the Chiefs. So what to expect from draft night? It's hard to say, probably more difficult than any other time in draft history. Will there be tech issues, dropped calls, dropped video conferencing, buffering, forgetting a password, hacking? That hacking possibility is intriguing. I read a story on SportsIllustrated.com, SI.com, posted last week about the suggestion that a team could be hacked and never know that it happened. If some tech-savvy person hacked into the laptop of somebody from the other team and got to see that team's draft notes, he might never know that that occurred. But look, mistakes have happened on draft night before. Ask the Minnesota Vikings, who were involved in missing their draft slot 2 straight years because they communicated their selection too late to the NFL. Or the Tampa Bay Bucks, who in 1982, because of confusion, didn't get the guy that they said they had selected. They got the guy that was announced at the podium. And that's when we were all on landlines. But let's hope that everything comes off without a tech hitch tonight, and the only mistakes are the ones made by the teams with their selections. The Cincinnati Bengals have the first pick, and in a few minutes you'll hear from John Clay and Josh Moore from the Lexington News Leader about the Bengals' choice. It's hardly a secret. They're going to take Joe Burrow, the LSU quarterback who's coming off a phenomenal season. It hasn't been announced yet, but I'd be stunned if that wasn't the case. You'll also hear John and Josh talk about some other draft prospects from their area. Filling out the top 6 in the draft order after the Bengals, the Washington Redskins, the Detroit Lions, the New York Giants, the Miami Dolphins, and the LA Chargers. We went 6 deep there because there could be some early movement. The Dolphins and Chargers, like the Bengals, are in the market for a quarterback. So the question becomes, would either trade spots with, say, the Lions or the Giants to get the player they want? And who might they want? Alabama quarterback Tua Tagovailoa is a wonderful talent who's battled injuries throughout his college career. Could those injuries scare off some teams? Could we see Tua drop a few spots in the first round? Oregon's Justin Herbert seems to have all the tools in somewhat of a less spectacular career than Tua. Are these franchise quarterbacks? The Dolphins and Chargers figure to let us know pretty soon. What else might we see tonight? Well, a lot of action by the Dolphins. They have 3 first-round picks and 14 overall. 14 picks in this draft. It's time for Miami to start turning things around. Other teams with multiple first-round picks are the Raiders, the Jaguars, the 49ers, the Vikings, and there are 6 teams without a first-round selection: the Bills, Steelers, Colts, Texans, Rams, and Bears. And we'll talk about those teams later in the show. The Chiefs and the Saints enter the draft with the fewest selections, 5. We'll either look to trade out of the first round to acquire more picks later on Friday and Saturday. And how about the Seattle Seahawks? They're scheduled to pick at number 27. They haven't selected where they've been slotted in the first round in the last 8 years, trading either up or down. Without being very specific, I think we're going to see a position group run. Quarterbacks early, offensive tackles next, wide receivers followed by cornerbacks. This shapes up as a particularly good year for wide receivers. Hey, and there's another element to our show. Tonight we're looking at nominees to become our community football fan hero. He or she should be someone whose work in and for the community goes above and beyond to help their neighbors and is also a football fan. Could be a doctor, a nurse, a firefighter, law enforcement official, teacher, or some other person tasked with public service. We'll tell you during the show how and where to deliver the nominees. We'll review them and determine a winner in May who will receive a pair of free tickets to an upcoming NFL game. And we're broadcasting in Kansas City. I'm sitting less than a football field distance away from the parade route traveled by the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs 78 days ago. Right across the street from where I was standing, on the roof of a building, by the way, a bus carrying quarterback Patrick Mahomes stopped, and Mahomes used the time to play catch with fans. It was a cool scene. That was early February. It's just a 2-walk block up the other way to Sprint Center where the Big 12 tournament was being held. That event didn't make it to the second day. We've missed sports since then. Tonight begins a 3-day return to semi-normal. We're all looking forward to spending this first evening with you. So we'll be right back after this message.
It feels like the world is shut down, but we haven't. Support the journalists bringing you the news when you need it most.
Okay, so we think Joe Burrow is going to be, we're pretty sure Joe Burrow is going to be the first selection in the NFL draft, the LSU quarterback. Let's take a little more time to learn something about Joe Burrow.
Come over here, standing on our far left.
Hi, Joe. Mark Myers, AP
Hi.
Broadcasting. Heisman and then a national title in just a few short weeks. Tell me what kind of emotions are you feeling now?
Some pretty good emotions. This is special. This doesn't happen. This doesn't come around every year. You know, this is a special group of guys that really came together, and it's as close of a group that I've ever been around. I'm just so happy I was able to do it with Coach O, Patrick, and the rest of the guys in that locker room.
Have you ever had a Rolex before? Well, perfect.
Yeah,
You're
perfect.
going to enjoy it.
Here's 2 checks.
We got 2 checks,
And you're
one for
on
Tarrant
one
Food
for
Bank
Tarrant area,
and one
one
for
for
Athens
Athens.
County.
I am beginning to understand the impact that I can have. You know, the fact that they will do that shows the kind of people that are here, and that's why I'm excited to be here right now. I've had a lot of people that have helped me put me in this position, and it's been, you know, a whirlwind couple of months and 12 months for me, and I have great people around me, and the fact that I'm even in this position is a blessing for me.
This is John Clay, sports columnist for the Lexington Herald-Leader and Kentucky.com, along with Josh Moore, UK football beat writer for the Lexington Herald-Leader and Kentucky.com. Josh, we haven't had any sporting events, but we're getting one on Thursday. It's the NFL Draft, which will be Thursday night. We're supposed to be in Las Vegas, so instead they're going to hold it virtually, a sign of the times here during the coronavirus pandemic. And just up the road, the Cincinnati Bengals have the #1 pick. I think it's pretty much a consensus that Joe Burrow is going to be the pick, the quarterback at LSU. How do you think he will fare with the Bengals?
Yeah, I mean, he's a local guy that'll, jump in right away and be able to. I mean, he's not going to take them to the playoffs. It's hard to think he'd take them to the playoffs in the first year, but I think he's a guy that, he'll be a step up. You've kind of gotten, you've seen what Andy Dalton can do. He's probably reached the ceiling there in Cincinnati. So you just kind of move on, get the future, kick-started with, the sexiest pick in the draft, the guy that really, tore it up at LSU last year and has a great story behind him. I mean, there's a lot of boxes that Joe Burrow checks. Now you're going to be really worried. You don't want a Tim Couch situation where you draft a guy who comes in with a lot of fanfare and has a big, kind of pedigree, and then you lose him in 2 or 3 years because you can't protect the guy. So that's, I mean, everything a lot of people know. Cincinnati needs to address that later in the draft. Taking linemen and doing some things and really doing their homework. And I think there's they might be in the trade market. They're a team there are a lot of teams that have all 7 of their picks in this draft, and they're one of them. So they might be able to do something with that too, somewhere if they're not liking what they see in the middle of the draft, maybe they'll make a move and cut a deal for one of these, a lineman that's already kind of a veteran guy, and that would be good. They need, you want to bring in some new guys if you can get some really, high grade talent, but otherwise, try to get some veterans out there.
Yeah, there has been some talk about maybe the Bengals trading the #1 pick, but it doesn't look like they're going to do that. To me, he's a perfect fit. 60 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, played in pretty much a pro-style offense that LSU had last year and was just fantastic in winning the Heisman. But as you mentioned, they got to protect them. Their offensive line has not been a strength. It looks like they probably will go for an offensive lineman with that first pick in the second draft, especially if a good one is available.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of guys out there too. I mean, it's a deep draft. I think, wide receivers, what you hear a lot as far as like the depth, the talent in this draft, but probably offensive linemen in general are next. I mean, just in the first round alone, there's probably 7 or 8 guys that could go in the first round. Now, those guys, there might be 1 or 2 that could be there in the second round when the Bengals pick first in the second round there. But you're really hoping, you're looking at guys like Ezra Cleveland, Prince from Auburn, some of those guys that, people still know and play for winning programs. I think that's important too. If you're the Bengals, you want guys that are talented, but you also want guys that are winners because they've had a lot of losing going on up there, and it never hurts to have guys that know how to win and know what it takes to do that.
There's a couple of local products, speaking of offensive linemen, who will go in the draft. The problem for the Bengals is they'll probably be long gone before that second pick comes up. One is a kid from right here in Lexington who played at Alabama, Jedrek Wheels. You covered Jedrek Wheels, Josh. What about what kind of player he is?
Yeah, he's really aggressive, really mean, plays with a kind of a fire. Which you like to see in an offensive lineman. A little undersized probably for the position, but he makes up for it with that intensity and with his, he's just really athletic too. You look at a guy that big and you're stunned at how athletic he is. Same thing for another guy that'll be picked in that same range, Mecca, Becton from Louisville. I mean, talk about you look at the guy and you see him run what he ran at the combine, and just think, wow, how in the world, can a human this big move that fast?
Yeah, 364 pounds. I think he ran a 5.140 at the combine.
It's ridiculous. I'd hate to know what I'd run at the combine, and I weigh half that. It's just
Yeah, both those guys, great prospects. I think I saw a stat today, Pro Football Focus stat, that Wheels had 929 pass blocking snaps, and he only gave up one quarterback sack there at Alabama. That's a pretty amazing statistic. Another guy who's another local guy who the Bengals might get in a later round is Logan Steinberg, offensive lineman at Kentucky. He, along with Lynn Bowden, are probably the two players from Kentucky who have the best chance of getting picked. What about their chances, you think, of hearing their names called this weekend as the draft? Draft starts Thursday, runs Friday, Saturday with the later rounds. What about those two guys?
Yeah, I'd be surprised if either one of those guys is picked, definitely in the first round. Neither one of them's going in the first round. Lynn, maybe. I mean, the thing I keep hearing with Lynn is, there's a lot of smoke screens, and maybe, third round, like Vince Merrill, the tight ends coach, and Vince, he can kind of inflate guys some, but in general, I think he is pretty well connected. He said he had a GM that he trusts that says if he'd be shocked if Lynn is there after the third round is completed. And he's got that kind of talent. Now you got to be the right team kind of taking him and trying to fit. As for Logan, I think Logan, he might end up falling to like the 5th or 6th round, but he's a guy that I think, again, kind of like Wheels, a little less, he's not as athletic, but he's a guy that's going to come in and be plugged in right away and be able to do a lot for a team. And that's, if you're looking for Cincinnati to take a local kid, it's more likely they'll end up with Logan than they would Lynn, just because he fits more of what they need immediately. And again, maybe he might not be as a starter, but he could be a guy who comes in and makes up that offensive line rotation and kind of adds some aggressiveness to it.
Yeah, had a good Senior Bowl. I think he impressed a lot of people down there. So it'll be interesting on draft night, which is Thursday night. Be sure and follow all the coverage on all the McClatchy outlets and on Kentucky.com. And look forward to the draft on Thursday. Thanks, Josh.
Anytime.
Okay, that was Josh Moore and John Clay from the Lexington News Leader talking about the Cincinnati Bengals and some other players from their area that I'm pretty sure we're going to see selected in the first round tonight. The Bengals are on the clock. The NFL Draft has started. The way it works is the teams have 10 minutes to make their picks for first round selections. That time frame reduces on Friday's second and third round and Saturday's fourth round. So the Bengals, 2-14 last year, matched the franchise record for the worst record since the Bengals came into the league in the late 1960s as an AFL expansion team. Head coach Zach Taylor getting ready to start his second year with the Bengals. I remember him as the Nebraska quarterback, covered him in a Big 12 championship game here at Arrowhead Stadium. Just one of the young, offensive-minded coaches now in the NFL. And even with a new quarterback for the Bengals, that doesn't answer the question of what's going to become of Andy Dalton. Is Andy Dalton kept to groom Joe Burrow, assuming it is Burrow? Are there other teams interested in perhaps a quarterback that would trade with the Bengals? I don't think that's going to happen. I think if we see a trade for a quarterback, it'll happen a little bit later, not too long from now, but a little bit later. The last time the Bengals took a quarterback with their first pick was in 2003. That was when Heisman Trophy winning Carson Palmer was selected by Cincinnati. Hey, the Bengals went to the playoffs twice in his career, but they haven't won a playoff game since the 1990 season. If it is Burrow, he'll become the fourth LSU quarterback taken in the first round. The others, Jamarcus Russell in 2007, not a good pick, as it turned out. Burt Jones in 1973. Burt Jones had a nice career with the then Baltimore Colts. And Y.A. Tittle in 1948. But here's something interesting. The only LSU quarterback to ever win a playoff game, none of those guys. It's David Woodley with the Miami Dolphins. Also, if it's Joe Burrow, it'll be the third straight year that a Heisman Trophy quarterback winner will be taken at number 1, following a couple of Oklahoma quarterbacks. Baker Mayfield going to the Cleveland Browns after the 2018 draft, and Kyler Murray, of course, with the Arizona Cardinals last year. Burrow also can join Cam Newton as the only players in the common draft era, which started in 1967 when the AFL and the NFL decided to merge. Of course, the merge didn't happen until the 1970 season. But since 1967, Joe Burrow can join Cam Newton as the only players to go number 1 after winning the Heisman Trophy and leading their team to a national championship. So, look, the Bengals have so many holes. A new quarterback isn't going to fix things immediately. They need offensive line help. They need help at linebacker. There are some positions that they're feeling pretty good about. Kicker, punter for one. Not everybody has those. The Bengals seem to be good there. Running back, they seem solid there. Look, it is still a work in progress for the Cincinnati Bengals, a ways to go. Among these teams that are picking early, after the Bengals are the Washington Redskins and the Detroit Lions, the New York Giants, the Miami Dolphins, the Los Angeles Chargers. Of the teams that are picking early, the Bengals may have farthest to go when it comes to rebuilding a team and getting their act together, as it were. So, playing in a tough division with the Baltimore Ravens, the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the improving Cleveland Browns, all of which the Ravens and the Browns anyway drafting much later here in the draft. Browns at 10, the Ravens later than that, and the Steelers, as I said earlier, no pick in the first round. So we are waiting on the Cincinnati Bengals pick, and after the Bengals get their pick in, I hope to rejoin John Clay of the Lexington Herald-Leader. We're going to talk Cincinnati Bengals. We're going to talk Joe Burrow, and we are going to have a discussion about what the Bengals' future is. So, waiting on Cincinnati's pick. Joe Burrow, by the way, as I get the Joe Burrow card out. Where are you, Joe? It was interesting with Joe. Before the season, he was coming off a nice season for LSU, but nobody envisioned the type of year that he had with the Bayou Bengals of LSU. He's coming off one of the best years that a college quarterback has ever had. 60 touchdown passes, NCAA record 60 touchdown passes. I think half of those came against Oklahoma in the national semifinal game. Actually, it was 7. 7 against Oklahoma, 5 against Clemson in the 2 games to win the college football playoff. He started his career at Ohio State, interestingly enough. So if he goes to the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Burrow will be headed home. He's from Athens, Ohio. Going back to Ohio, I think we're going to see some of that in the draft with other players, guys who have a chance to go back to their home state. And there's something else interesting about Ohio State players. Look, the Buckeyes have a chance with Chase Young and Jeff Okudah to have the first 3 picks in this draft of players who started their college careers at Ohio State. That's actually pretty incredible. So waiting on the first pick of the 2020 draft, the most unusual of drafts. After the Bengals, as I said, the Washington Redskins will select. After the Redskins, it's the Detroit Lions. After Detroit, we're going to have the Miami Dolphins at number 5, and we'll have the LA Chargers at number 6. Quarterbacks, I think we might see quarterbacks 3 of the first 6 positions taken. With after Joe Burrow, Tua Tagovailoa of Alabama and Justin Herbert of Oregon would be in the mix for the top quarterbacks selected in the draft. Waiting on the first pick. to be made. You know, I've always found it interesting that in the NFL draft that when the first pick seems obvious to everyone, that the teams take their allotted 10 minutes anyway. I think the Bengals could have taken this pick to Commissioner Roger Goodell and early on, before the draft even started, and could have had this done early. But I think for tonight's broadcast, which is so unusual, like I said, with Roger Goodell at his Westchester County home in New York, and the teams, all 32 teams at their homes, personnel scattered all around the country. It's just there's a lot of messaging. I'm watching the ESPN broadcast here in our Kansas City Star studio, and a lot of public address announcements, a lot of public service announcements public service announcements for the coronavirus, and Dr. Fauci on now. So there's just there's a lot of information that a lot of commercials that we're going to see, a lot of ads, different type of ads that we're going to see tonight that you wouldn't normally see during a draft. Yeah, let's go to John.